Okay, and we are live on both. And then I'll start recording. I don't know where it's gonna save.
Put my phone on silent.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Because I heard it very well. Okay, we recording. Watch your tongue,
What?
all of you.
Which one? Which tongue?
Yeah, that tongue. The one that you have. All right, so I'll just do a quick intro for us, and we'll go around the room, right? But I guess the purpose of the conversation, what we want to discuss, is for more or less like self-growth, self-awareness, and then all the things associated to that. But then the first thing that we all agreed we should start to think about is self-reflection. So we're going to break this down into 3 core sections. It's the theory, the understanding of the idea, the practice of it, and then ultimately the results that you want to try and get around that. And then why don't we go around the room, and then we'll go top left to right to bottom left to right. So Alice, you want to go first?
I'm first. So I guess we're going to start talking about where does self-reflection begin.
Yeah, but introduce yourself too. So.
Oh yes. I'm Alize. How should I introduce myself? What should I say? Just my name?
And you could practice because might be more than once. But what are you? Right? Are you like a learner? You're what are you developing yourself into being too? Right? Like you're studying real estate, you work jobs, you're doing good things in your life. So where are you at?
Well, I am Alize. I am 19 years old and I'm learning lots in life. I am doing real estate. I am working and I am focusing on becoming a better person for my future.
Love it. Love it.
Anyways, who's next?
Julia's next.
Oh, I can't tell the order, sorry. Hi, I'm Julia. I am Joe's wife, and I'm a mother and a teacher. So basically, those are my identities: wife, mother, teacher. Very excited to continue to talk about self-reflection because that is very important to everybody.
All right, Jacob.
Hey there, I'm Jacob. I'm an application developer, lifelong learner, I guess multi-faceted handyman as well. I like to do a variety of different tasks and trades across tons of different domains and sports. I guess that's it.
Cool. And well, you guys all know me, but I'm Joe, and I'm a consultant. So it's part of what I do for work is I'm a enterprise consultant, but I focus on AI and automation systems, how they intersect together. But for the purposes of this conversation, I'm more of a lifelong learner, definitely someone who studies, philosophy, self-reflection, psychology, and wants to like apply those learnings and then be able to share and then extend them to the world. So, okay, so I'll kick us off for one. And I know we have, again, theory, practice, and results are the 3 core sections. So we're going to focus on first is the theory section, what we want to go through there. And we want to talk about where does self-reflection begin? So, why don't Alize, you pick someone to go first and give their perspective on where self-reflection begins.
Sure. I'll pick Jacob. Where do you think self-reflection begins?
I believe self-reflection starts at failure. It seems like people only need to self-reflect when they come across issues in their lives and they need to, you know, adapt or change to their situation. Often people that are content don't self-reflect, which is kind of an issue.
How about like failure, but also like rock bottom too, right? Like I feel like sometimes failure is not enough, but even like hitting rock bottom for some people is the real place where they need to get to self-reflection. But yeah.
I agree.
All right, pass it around, Jacob.
Okay. I think Julia's next.
Where does it begin? I think self-reflection begins with your inner child, if that makes sense. Because that's kind of what we're battling, I think, within ourselves. And it begins with looking inward, obviously. Not any external factors, but looking inward, and what's inward is our inner child, and what we kind of battle constantly is like what holds us back with things, and what we're fighting is our self, and I think that's where it begins.
I like that idea too of like inner child for one is like the space of self where like you grew up. So it's like the environment and the things that you came to understand, but it's also before you ever understood those things, right? Like before the world ever conditioned you to be how you are, like who did you want to be in the first place, right? And I think like sometimes like the ultimate nirvana of like what self-reflection is that space of like going back and like rediscovering that inner younger person before you ever even were damaged by the rest of the world. So
Getting past your ego and trying to break through that, right?
mm-hmm.
Ego's a
Self.
good.
All right, pass it along.
Pass it along. Joe, what do you feel about this self-reflection? Where does it begin for you?
I definitely like the idea of failure. I think I would have to come back to like what my tattoo says too, and it's the idea of that inner child, right? But it's also the idea of like striving for like a best in your life, and people want to have a best in their lives, but they don't necessarily have like the path towards that. So I think we all want to do our best, and we all have this internal sense of judgment towards ourselves and towards others. And the more we learn to like, turn it inwards, that's like the self-reflection piece, but also the more we learn to like degrade the perspective towards others, right? Like don't necessarily take the same best that you apply towards yourself towards others, you actually even become healthier in that perspective of self-reflection. And
A lot of
Allison,
the time,
sorry.
well, hold on. A lot of the time, a lot of people don't know that they can do better as well. They have this expectation that where they're at is the best they could be a lot of the time. And sometimes failure causes them to reevaluate those ideas.
Mm-hmm.
They get essentially landlocked or conditioned into thinking this is the best quality or level they're ever going to get to, and thus can't break free of that until they get kind of torn down and have to rebuild themselves.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, we put hurdles in front of ourselves,
Yeah.
right? A lot of the time that stop us from actually seeing who we are. And it's partially that conditioning, but it's also this perspective of best. Like we're doing the best in the relative space of where we are, right?
Yeah.
Like you can only do the best based on what you know your best is, right? Okay.
Does that fit with the frog in the pot theory?
Yeah.
Because sometimes, like, I can feel that way where I don't realize that I don't really take the time to self-reflect or think about what's going on. But then when you do, you're like, wow, I kind of actually was slowly going through something like what you were saying, like the frog in the boiling pot, like slowly will not realize they're going through something. But when you hit like the rock bottom or the failure, that's kind of when it brings your attention to, a sense of urgency to make a change.
It's almost like the
If that
pot
makes sense.
boiling over, at
What is
that
that
point.
theory? What is that?
Well, it's just that the frog doesn't realize that the temperature is going up in the pot. So it'll stay in the pot until it boils and it dies. But if you actually become aware, you finally realize like that it was hot, or like maybe something drew your attention outside of the pot. But you are boiled by the environment or the upbringing that you have in your experience. So, yeah.
That's what it made me think of.
Mm-hmm. All right, Nalize, where does self-reflection begin for you?
I feel like self-reflection begins in choice. And I feel like failure is a part of that, where you first fail, but I feel like a lot of people also fail and continue in a negative mindset. So I feel like the real part where true self-reflection begins is choice after failure and after forgiveness to yourself. Once you forgive, you have to make the choice in becoming a better for yourself. And that can be start, sometimes I feel like there is kind of a outwardly comparison and impression that happens. You see someone else who's very calm in themselves, who loves themselves in a way that makes you want to love yourself. So, I feel like in a way you see other people love themselves and you wish to love yourself. And it's almost, I don't want to say impossible. It's hard to want to make the choice of being of self-reflection without a comparison. And that goes into the stages of grief, where it first starts with the problem, being angry at yourself, forgiving yourself, and becoming better off of what happened.
Mm-hmm. I like that
So I think
idea
it's
too, because like it helps you give a perspective of like what you want to be too, right? Like it's sometimes self-reflection is like a lot about tearing yourself down, but you're also talking about the idea of like where do you want to be or who do you want to be in the future, and it's also about the people you surround yourself with too, right? Like you have to reflect on like the importance of those people. I'm sorry, I know
definitely.
you had more.
No, no, no. That's where I was getting at you, where, you to truly self-reflect and to self-reflect, I feel like productively, you need to accept the idea of better change, of changes that you're going to implement as soon as you start reflecting in order to create a better outcome and a reaction that you're proud of. And, I feel like that goes into what we are talking about the 15% of how truly only 15% of the people who reflect are actually reflecting correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like reflecting shouldn't be critical and shouldn't be intertwined with self-hate. And it should be more self-compassion and with the idea of becoming a better person instead of knocking yourself down with it.
I think that's a
Which
good
goes
segue, which maybe you should introduce the topic of like rumination versus reflection versus obsession.
rumination versus
Hmm.
reflection versus obsession.
Yeah. Do you want to
Yes,
introduce that?
sure. So, personally, I believe a rumination in itself isn't productive in any way. It goes into, it makes people depressed and it makes people self-hate. Introspection might be a better word to use, or just self-reflection in general, where reflection is more, what's the word, beneficial.
Self projection's way worse, by the way. I don't want that, but
Self-projection.
yeah,
Don't do that.
yeah, don't
Don't
do
do
that.
that, guys.
But
I got confused. No, but self-reflection is productive. In self-rumination, you focus more on the what if instead of self-reflection, where you focus on what can I change and how can I become better from this moment instead of staying stuck in the past of rumination.
hmm. And one more thing is the topic of obsession and like the relationship to the two, but then also what is healthy obsession? Could you introduce that for us?
Healthy obsession is a hard one. I feel like, in a way, healthy obsession is never healthy because you can never healthily be obsessed with something. I feel like you have the most power in your life, and obsession gives that power to something else. At the end of
Okay.
the day, you know, I I feel like you could be passionate, but obsession is when you give, again, power to something else in a way.
So I want to
How do you
challenge that, but does anyone else want to challenge that first before I do?
Go ahead.
Well, like the idea of what I would ideally be obsessed about would be like family for one, right? Like family is super important. Being devoted and obsessed with my family, but in a good way, right? like seizing the best outcomes for my family, but also like Albert Einstein, right? Like he was obsessed with physics. He was obsessed with the ideas that helped him understand the universe, and like actually this idea of like what is the meaning of the universe in itself. Or someone like Viktor Frankl, where like his idea of obsession helped him survive the Nazi internment camps, right? And then through that experience, he actually helped other people too. So like he was a psychologist, and his obsession was understanding the meaning in life, and he carried that like understanding and obsession through the experience that other people, even actually the his captors, right, like the Nazi SS and everything like that, those people actually were looking to him and seeking advice from him because he actually had like something that was a little bit beyond himself, which I think is kind of a key attribute to obsession. Is it's not just you, it's almost like something bigger than you too.
Is would you say a meaning in life is the same as an obsession, or would you say that those are two different things? Personally, I feel like obsession is something that's almost uncontrollable and it's infatuated. Like you're completely infatuated in it, you know?
Mm-hmm. I guess you could say, like, if we're going semantics, right? You could deep dive down a rabbit hole, and then you could say like, yeah, obsession is maybe unhealthy if it's purely on the perspective of not associated with meaning. But when it becomes associated with meaning, as long as it doesn't lead to neglect, right? I think there's a nuance there, but because rumination and obsession is unhealthy, but reflection and obsession, right? Like there's a self awareness to that, and then also it's all the components of self growth as well. I think Julia had to step away for the baby, just so we know. But
Oh,
yeah,
it's okay. Fair enough. What do you think, Jacob?
Um, Obsession can be good, but when it interferes with, you know, your daily functions and it gets in the way of the things that are important, that's when it becomes destructive. Um, but general obsession can be very, very good if it's honed and pointed in the right direction, regardless of self-reflection and that reflection in general. Um, it is a tool, if anything, that can be utilized to great effect, especially when you are self-reflecting, specifically to make changes in your life and focus on completing things or making changes that you should have done before. Um, Maybe it's to get through difficult times. You can obsess over other things instead of being caught up in the minutia of whatever problems you're currently facing.
also not for nothing, like even the idea of like romantic obsession, which I think is like the most common way that people think about it. Sometimes that can even be like a catalyst for people to get through hard times in their lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like especially if you don't have much else to cling on to, often like the first thing that we do cling on to is like another person, right? And if that person is also a good person in your life, then maybe that obsession is partially justified, right? Um, but that is also like per se like the most extreme and scary form of it that could occur. So
I feel like that's a big part of obsession, it's making sure you still have a choice in obsession where it doesn't come to a point where it's uncontrollable or something else has a choice over you. And on top of that, the dependency in obsession. I feel like that's a fine line where if you're, like you said, if you're too dependent on something and it's a good influence, then it works out in your favor. But in the idea that you're obsessed and dependent on something that is not a good influence, it
mhm.
completely changes the picture, and that becomes a bad obsession. So yeah, I feel like that's the line. I feel, where does choice and where does dependency lie in your obsession, and how much is it helping you in your path?
Yeah, I if we want to keep talking about this, we can. But I think it might be a good time to transition to the idea of. Well, I was thinking like, what is the perfect system, right? But it also kind of comes back to where is it? The space between, and I don't know if we have something to talk about that, but let's just talk about it anyhow, right? Like the cycle of stimulus and response, right? And the idea that we can actually control our lives. Like we have this idea, this space where we actually have the ability to manifest our destiny, right? Or to like fulfill our own prophecy. And I know like the, famous quote that I would always bring up is like Viktor Frankl says, there's a space between stimulus and response. And in that space lies our choice and our freedom, right? So you were talking much about choice. And I really think that is kind of where, going back to what you were saying before, like the root of self-reflection, right, is where we actually start to find choice in our lives. And like we choose not only not to believe like the biases and like the foundational perspectives that we start with, but we also choose to like be more open-minded and to seek more understanding in life. I'm gonna pass it to Jacob. What do you think about those ideas? And then what would you say about the space between and choice?
Well, I'd like to start off with saying that you have to believe that you have free will in Manifest Destiny, and that your prophecy is a choice. And there are certain inflection points in that choice that you get to make. You don't get to make every single decision and just veer off and do whatever. But the gap, like Viktor Frankl says, that small sliver of space in between, what was it? I forget the, sorry. What was
Space
the quote,
between
Joe?
stimulus and response. Yeah.
Stimulus and response. That's it.
Yeah.
I was missing the
Mhm.
word. That small, very small point is a turning point at which you can make any decision you'd like. And it's that action that is the important decider in your destiny. And you have to believe that you have free will to make those choices and are not just being guided along the entire time. If you make the choice, that decision will actually propagate into your prophecy, essentially.
Mhm.
But it has to be made. And if you don't make it, that is another decision you are choosing in that path.
So the belief of free will too gives you the opportunity to take action.
Yeah.
Where like if you don't believe in your own, like if you're fatalistic,
You,
essentially,
you
right?
will
You believe.
not, yeah. You essentially leave it up to fate. You say, my fate has already been determined. There is no changing what will be. There is only what is, essentially. And that is a terrible way to reflect on that. There needs to be, to make changes, there needs to be the understanding that you can make a change to begin with. If there is no change, if there's no action, then there's no point in self-reflection. And it's obvious that we as people, whether you think it's determined or not, we make choices, and there are points at which those simple choices radically change the outcomes of our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there's choices that are made in like different domains of our life, right? And I think this is a good transition to the idea of like where those perspectives lie. So Alice, I'm gonna challenge you. The perspectives of self that we have discussed. What are those perspectives? Can you explain them to us? And then please pass the buck when you're ready. So.
Sure. The perspective of self is first self, which is more of your shallow physical body, what you feel at first, your, I guess, initial emotions that you feel. Then goes to the observer, which is your more third person view. It's more connected to less of your initial emotions and more of how you're going to react to those emotions. First, the deeper thought you put behind it. From observer, it goes to the other, which is the other person, the other individual, the individuals more around you, I'd say. It's more how you react to people on a day-to-day basis. And then that turns to the community, I believe, right? Where it turns into kind of the world, how the community around you act, where, you know, you could say there's more parts to that where it's your own community and then it goes to the, you know, state you live in, to the world as a whole, and
The
gets more
society,
unfamiliar. Society, yep.
hmm
How society is, and the more unfamiliar society and how your choices kind of affect that. And the idea is to change from focusing on yourself to becoming more of an observer and focusing on the bigger picture, but especially your own emotions in a third person view in order to react in a better like than you normally would.
hmm Yeah, so trying to be a better version of yourself, right? But then each of
Yeah.
those perspectives is super critical, and then understanding those perspectives. So I kind of want to toss a question out to everyone, and please just answer openly. But the idea of how do we enact our choice, right? How do we actually take control and like enact our choices in each of those perspectives of self, and which of them is the most important to you?
I'd say observer is the most important because I feel like, you know, the most important thing should be yourself because that's where your actions are coming from, you know? And you could base most of your power off of that in a way. You could affect self, community, and other by observer if you utilize it correctly.
Okay, yeah. I was gonna say, is it the self or the observer? Because you were kind of saying a little bit of both,
No,
but
no,
you
no. Yeah,
can perceive the self when you stand in the position of the observer, essentially.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And same with other society, I feel. You could perceive it all of it,
Perceive it all.
all of it,
Mhm.
all of it. Yeah.
Jacob, you got something to say there?
The the observer observes the self and is essentially the critic. So the observer takes a step back and looks at the individual holistically, um, which a lot of people don't do. So it is an important step in self-reflection that you essentially disassociate, not in the way you would uh, understand disassociation, but um, essentially reflecting on oneself from an outside perspective. Um, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, and Julia, I know you got a baby there. Do you want to comment?
Yes, baby. But I like what you guys have to say about all this. And it's new to me that those perspectives. So I do enjoy hearing what you guys are saying about that. I'm actually learning about that too right now. So I kind of don't have any input on that,
Mm-hmm.
but I like to hear what you guys have to say.
Was there anything in the podcast that you were listening to earlier that talked about it at all, or what was?
It did not.
No.
No, it was no, a little different direction. But
Okay. What did you like about that podcast? So maybe we can just think about how that would fit into our conversation here.
the one I listened to
Mm-hmm.
today. I liked like kind of what I said in the beginning, how it was how self-reflection is like based on looking at your inner child and thinking about like you're looking at yourself. I guess that would be the observer. I don't know. It's hard to
What?
talk with because she's fussing right now, but it just basically went through how you can recognize your emotions better and yeah, sorry. She's really distracting. So maybe somebody else could talk for a bit
Okay. Well, I did like, and I want to pass that
right
out
here.
too, is like the self piece that you called out that we didn't really talk about was in the idea of the self, the inner child, right? Because the observer does look at the inner child, but I think that's a layer of self. Like we explored, to kind of recap, we explored the societal selves that exist, which is like the state, the culture, right, the community, things like that. we understand that like the third person is like one that's just out of the body and like can kind of look down objectively at all the other selves. And then, oh, I'm losing track of myself. What is it? There's the self, the society, the other,
Observer.
right? The other,
The other.
right? So there's the people around us, and like how they are taking on the perspective of the self, and then there's the self and the inner child. And actually, I think that's an even more important relationship per se. Is like the inner child is more damaged by the other than any other factor in these perspective of selves, right? And it's why the self and the other were actually on polar opposites of our diagram, which when we go back and we like edit on this too, I want to make some diagrams and we'll put those up so we can kind of frame that up and see that in the conversation. But Jacob, sounds like you have a point. So
I would actually say the self is more damaging to the child, because I believe that most kids, as they grow up, are damaged by their childhood, not because of the effects of other people, but because of the weight of the decisions they make and the challenges they face that actually like turns them off to making decisions that would actually benefit them because they're either more difficult or they feel that they're the wrong decision. So they are almost like they, essentially their mentality as a child as you grow up is like debilitating. I don't know how to say it in a nice, succinct way, but when I grew up, I felt like there was a lot of self-imposed challenges that I shouldn't have faced in the first place. Either I should have, reached out more or asked for help, and those were just fears that I built up over time, and it took a lot of time to tear a lot of those down, and I probably still have a lot more of them that need to be torn down, but a lot of them feel self-imposed. It's not necessarily like anyone did them on purpose or anything like that. It's not like society um, specifically taught me these fears or anything like that. But
okay, I think there's a piece of that. That's true. I feel like you have something to say, Alize.
I do.
Yeah, let's
You
get it.
see,
Mhm.
in therapy, we've been talking about how usually those things are based off of patterns you did see when you were younger. Maybe you did try to talk to someone, and due to that, and the way they reacted is how you react later in life. You know, I feel like when it comes to self-reflection and the self, childhood, your childhood self is part of that, on top of kind of what you're saying, which is your pre self-reflection mindset as well, which is also a battle you're facing, which, is childhood mixed with how you reacted before you self-reflected, which is usually just straight to action, straight to response, straight to regretful choices, and straight to, developing a mindset that you're not really proud of. And that's something that's you're still self, that's still yourself, and that's still something you have to reflect on and change in the future. But usually those mindsets are based off of things that did happen in childhood and patterns that you did subconsciously pick up and base the rest of your life off of, because when you're younger, that's what you're learning and that's what you based your reality off of. So basing that childhood reality off of your now more hopefully grown reality and mentality, and how to grow from there.
Mhm. So like childhood experiences, especially, they lead to like a subconscious. Yeah, heard that baby, right? They lead to a subconscious self that like you might not be proud of, right? And then those like that subconscious self often has fears and things that are baked into it. I do like understand the idea of there is a piece of us that does it to ourselves, right? Like there is all like we all have like inherent anxiety per se, right? Even like genetic anxiety, like it's been studied and shown like our genome passes down certain traits from our ancestors. But there is also like for say like math teachers, like math specifically, there's been a lot of research done that the prime factor for you enjoying and doing well in math is how well did your math teacher actually like facilitate the subject in a positive, constructive way, right? Or like, people in your life who put you down at a young age, right? Or like do things to take advantage of you, or like don't support you, right? Like don't believe in you per se. Like I always had a challenge, especially where I felt like people put me up on a pedestal when I was a little kid, and like especially the idea that like I was supposed to be this straight A student. I was in all these like honor roll programs and things like that, right? And then I was like part of this like talent youth search where like they were doing like the SATs and like all these like per se semi genius tests on us or whatever they were. But that like pressure of like belief in existence actually caused me to not want to be as much of that, which is why, especially after I was like 10, 11 years old, I regressed so much in my life because it was not like a supportive pressure, it was an expectation, right? Like, this is who you should be. So it instilled the fear actually of education on me. And now, like, I think a ton of my life is devoted now to like breaking down and understanding and supporting people through that education, right? But actually, it was like a fundamental barrier to becoming like the real self that I wanted to be, and it was very much like part of the other, right? Like the people around me who help instill that in me.
I agree.
But
I
those
agree.
those walls were not put in place by the other. They didn't say you couldn't do this. They were expectations, and
Mm-hmm.
those expectations turned into self-expectations, which then you feel you couldn't compete with or meet at a certain point, and thus you build a phobia or a fear around attempting it.
Yeah, the
And
unintentional consequences are still consequences, if that makes
yeah,
sense, right?
but
Definitely
those are not something that you can change from the perspective of another. Like to break down those fears, you have to break them down on this from a self perspective to work through a lot of those um, changes, I guess, for back.
But a part I feel like of that is definitely, for self-reflection, you have to be open to the idea of leaving triggering situations, which, because some environments do impose a mindset and impose triggers. So, let's say, for example, and there's been like, I can't name one, but experiments like this where they took a baby and they buzzed it every time it did something in order to show how negative, you know, actions influence how much a person reacts in later in life. So, you have to take out that buzzer from your life, which is part of how your mind changes. Your environment is a very big part of how your mind develops and how you act.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, yes, it goes back to yourself and how you take that information and how you know, integrate it into your life, but your environment doesn't have to be that way. And your environment can change to a more positive, more or less triggering environment in order to change your mind. You
And
know,
there's
there is
Pavlov's
physical.
dogs, by the way, just so you know. That's an experiment that you might have been thinking about, where they like shock the dogs to like discourage them from eating or whatever, and then I think they would give them food or whatever and shock them, and then it got to a point where they could just shock them and they would start to salivate, and they would have this
Mhm.
expectation of food, but they would never actually eat. So like you can be conditioned by your environment, whether it's a negative or a positive stimulus, and it can just condition you to have like a permanent response or expectation inside of yourself.
Exactly. Because, at the end of the day, you can't change your mindset at a certain point. As much as your environment shows you one thing, you're going to believe that one thing. So sometimes in order to change your mindset, you have to change your environment to show, to have more physical evidence that this isn't true all the way, that this isn't the truth and to change your mindset in that way.
Hmm. I will think just to say on like Jacob's point, I think the idea that the only path forwards is through the self, right? But there is a place for recognizing the origins of where it all began, right? Like how did my subconscious, how did my life How did my perspective become manipulated and pushed into this way of being? But then the only way that you actually make any real change in your life is through yourself. Like nothing can actually fix you but you at the end of the day. Now, it is great to have people and environments and places and influences that drive you towards that, but it's the work that you put in that actually creates the results.
I agree.
Cool. I want to ask another fun question we'll move on to. How does an individual act in the faith of the society that they desire? Because I think this is a very, very apropos question, right? We were just talking about how we condition or are conditioned by experiences within ourselves or within our childhood. So how do we now act in the faith of a way that we want to perpetuate the new world that we would see post-reflective self, if that makes sense?
I feel like you start with small changes. You don't, I mean, you have a bigger picture, but you change actions subtly,
Suddenly?
small,
Oh, subtly.
sub,
Yeah.
subtly,
Uh-huh.
sorry.
Stoicism. Yeah. So.
Like, small changes at first, and let's say that can be helping a lady at the grocery store, if in hopes that everyone becomes a little bit more um nicer. Kind of like how some people go to a fast food chain and they will pay for the person behind them, and usually that starts a chain in the actions of the next person. So I feel like in order to create a society that you would like to see, you make those small changes and you stay continuous with it. You stay, what's that word? You actively practice that in order to make that change in society.
Mm-hmm. So practice and staying consistent,
It's just, yeah.
and making small changes, right, are the three things.
Incremental.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think you would have something about a certain book too, Jacob, that comes to mind now. The
Too many
power
books to
of
think about.
the power of.
The Power of Habit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, The Power of Habit is an interesting one, but I'd like to take a step back
Mm-hmm.
and just talk about values a little bit and how you need to build a system of values that will work with the society that you're in. You can't change the values of society. You can only act your values in that society. So as an individual, you have to make incremental changes, build consistency, incremental actions essentially that contribute to a larger whole of your system of values, and it's less about the amount, but the consistency overall. Being consistent in those values is what really matters when you need to act in that society. Um, So building a system of habits and actions, triggers, and such are an important step into being very consistent and realistic with those outcomes, essentially. You can't go from 0 to 100 if you can't get from 0 to 10. So make incremental changes, build on habits. Those habits will be reinforced with time, and as you build on top of those habits and build on top of those habits.
Mm-hmm. So what I do want to say is I think you did illustrate a path to change the values in society, but it is through your own values and through your own
Yeah.
action only, right?
You don't get to
Um,
decide the values of society. You only
yeah.
get to decide your own values, and those will reflect on society. Hopefully, shorter rather than later at all. But your values are what matters in your self reflection.
Yeah, you can't change the values by force, but you can change them by willful action over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
To build on that, I feel like community as well is a big one, finding like-minded individuals and
Mhm.
individuals who are willing to see other paths and willing to understand, which kind of goes into self as well. To in order to find people to understand, you also have to be understanding and you also have to be open-minded. And by that, you can create a community that's open and a community that hopes to sh- shared or same shared values to new people and create a place for those values. And sooner or later, that becomes a bigger movement.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I feel like that's a big part of it. Personal actions on top of finding a community that, or creating a community that also believes in very similar shared values.
So, idea on this, just real quick, is a little tangent for us, but I also want us to feel comfortable that we can go on tangents, just so you guys know. So, don't feel like we're super stuck in this or anything. We can definitely be a little more freeform. But I was thinking we should create a Discord that's separate from our current Discord that is just focused on like what we're discussing in this podcast, because then we can just have it be about these types of discussions. Like our current one is more of like a per se personal space, but it's like the aggregate hub of all the things that we're trying to do, right? But just thought on community, right? Getting our community out there, and then also finding more like-minded conversation around that community. So yeah,
I agree. That's the next step.
let's do it. Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to practice, because I think we've done a good time. We spent 40 minutes or so talking about theory, which there's a little bit of a startup there, so probably like more like 35 minutes or so talking about theory. But we have three core things, and the first one, and again, please feel free to freeform tackle this as appropriate. But where does and how does practice begin? Who'd like to go first?
I'll go first. Um, Practice begins with consistent everyday reflection. Without consistent, repetitive reflection on your actions, you will not be able to make good judgments about your future. Um, Self-reflecting once on your current situation is like a moving goalpost. Every day is different. Every day requires, or relatively every day, requires a new lens on your life and the choices you've made, even from a previous day. You need to essentially examine your life and put your decisions under a microscope and how your actions go into practice. Um, if you don't put your actions into practice, then they are essentially not meaningful. Every time you self reflect, if you don't put your actions into practice, they are not meaningful. So, reflection with practice consistently is what you should be aiming for.
So, what would you think of as like key things to aim to do, right? Because you're especially talking on like a daily basis. And then I think especially you're focusing on the idea of reflection. I know that's generally what we're talking about, but especially the idea of reflection in a practiceful manner, right? What would be like your key takeaway from that?
The key would be to start small
Mm-hmm.
and question your essentially question everything and be curious about your experiences and ask if those were the the fullest experiences you could have gotten from or the fullest experience you could have gotten from those experiences, and ask if they could have been done differently or better, and start with that and be gentle with yourself.
So what about because the idea I like, but what about actions, specific actions that you would take?
I don't know. I'll pass that on to Alize.
There you go. His big
Okay.
brain.
Oh, all right, thank you. So I feel like to start off more general, one of the biggest actions you could take is actively thinking in the observer mindset. Actively, kind of like what you're saying, instead of saying, this is, let's say, for example, this is stupid. I feel like this is stupid. How can I react from there? How can I think about this in a more effective manner? I've seen other methods as well. One of them is called trigger map method, where basically you look at the things that are triggering, the things that make you upset, the things that are making you react in a way that you're not proud of. And you try your best to map it out. And that might involve writing it down and writing down the things that are making you upset. What does this connect to in maybe earlier in life, which is usually the case, it connects to something earlier in life that made you upset. And, an example I saw was a passive aggressive email, and how a passive aggressive email from your boss makes you feel like you are powerless, makes you feel like, makes you feel smaller. Why does this make you feel smaller? What in the past made you feel this way? You know, Another thing I saw was, before reacting, thinking, will I be proud of this tomorrow? Which goes into the self-reflecting on multiple days, when this action I'm about to do, will I be proud of this action tomorrow? And by taking a step back and thinking about that for a minute, I feel like that changes a big part of how you act. When you think about the future in your actions, when you think about how, once you act in any type of way that is solidified in the past and that will, take effect on your future, you will react in a better way, and you will reflect in a more productive way, knowing that it does have an effect on your future and the people around you. What else? I saw someone say something about a 90-second rule when it comes to anger. How at first you could only be angry for about 90 seconds, and after that's a choice. You choose to be angry after that. You continuously bring up the event that made you upset, and you think about how stupid it was, how much it affected you, instead of thinking about, this affected me, how can I move on from this? Which kind of goes into like triggering and how to take out your triggers.
That's
Same
something I
thing
could
with like,
honestly learn from. Just as a note, like
I know that was a big one to me. It was a good video. I'll send it, but it was good. It was about how, at first you have 90 seconds to really be angry, and that's your true emotional amount of time to be angry. And then past that is your own choice to be angry.
hmm
And if you choose to be angry past that, then you need to take a step back, you need to reflect and move on from there. You know, on top of that can be boundaries, kind of back into triggering. What boundaries do you have, and how can you practice these in a better manner that lets you react in a more mature way, because that's a big part. Whatever you're being fed can also be the reason why you're acting in a certain way. And by being able to set your own boundaries and setting your own limits, you limit the way you react in certain ways.
And that's like
At least that's all.
self-reflection with the other per se, right? Because I think you were talking
Definitely.
a lot about self-reflection with the self, and then like how do
Mhm.
you per se journal and like understand the way that you respond. But now you're kind of going into the idea of like practicing self-reflection with others, because anger was a good transition to that. But then also anger is also triggered by like a violation of a boundary, right? Is what
Oh,
happens,
definitely.
right? Like people tend to feel a feeling of injustice when they have anger, right? And so that idea of self-reflection with the other, right? I really like the actions that you were saying there. Do you have, other? I guess I would say the perspectives of like society, and then the observer too. Do you have any other actions that you would think about?
Let's see. Let me read what I put. I mean, when it comes to other, I feel like an important part is kind of what Jacob was saying, was taking time to really actively self-reflect like it's a job. Taking time either, I know once Jacob mentioned almost every hour, But, at the very least, at the end of the day, taking, let's say, 15 minutes, which has been proven to be productive, taking 15 minutes to just really actively self-reflect on everything you went through and how you want to change for the future, which is the most important part, you know. And I feel like that's a big part of Observer instead of stopping at what happened, continuing until, and I wrote this down somewhere.
I have a question too. Is who here self reflects at the end of the day? I'm gonna put my hand down because it's not true. But do any of us?
At the end of the day, no.
No. Do you?
Every time I
Alzai?
go to the gym, yeah,
That's fair. That's fair.
I do a lot of self-reflection in down times where I'm either listening to music or other moments of peace without other people, where you get to essentially focus on essentially anything you'd like. But self-reflection can only happen in a time of almost like peace and calm. You can't do it while people are pulling your attention away. It takes time and dedication to do so.
That's what I think. It has to be almost a task in itself. It has to be its own job in itself that you seriously dedicate time to. And, you can listen to music and things, but at the end of the day, it's something that you don't let distractions get in the way of, you know?
So I like the idea of where we were in the conversation of how like we're talking about the actions to take. But I did want to come to that idea where we had talked about the mountain before of self-reflection, right? And like you're climbing up one side and then you got my give you finger. And then you come to the peak at the top. And this is like the axiom where like per se it's like the hardest to self-reflect, but then actually it should be like a progression towards the bottom of like, oh, I can find more peace right at the end of this journey. Um, where do you guys see that peak in this journey of self-reflection?
Um, I think the
Go ahead.
peak, you know what? To be honest, I feel like that peak a lot is in pride. And I know this sounds crazy, but once you feel prideful about the actions you're taking and that you could see a good response, you're personally reacting better. You feel prideful in the way you're acting, and due to that, you continuously practice self-reflection and you continuously learn, you know, is when you reach that peak because you now have a passion, you now have a reason, and you see the results of your self-reflection. You see the way it's taking changes in your life. You see how the people around you are acting, and I feel like it kind of lies in pride. It lies in the moment you notice that there is change and you're proud of your change, almost.
I want to just challenge that a little. I think pride is like the old man in the village who's looking down at all of his people and he's seen how he's helped like raise however many families, right? But
That's fair.
and I think it's part of the journey, but also when your pride is like per se violated, right? Like when you are acting in a prideful way and people don't act in that way, pride can like also become a source of anger, right? If that makes sense, because like your
it goes against your
expectation kind
pride.
of carries over, right?
Ooh.
So I feel like, oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to talk, Jacob?
No, well, I was gonna say that that peak is probably closer to something more like self-acceptance. So once you hit that peak, things could get easier as you've hit your um, I'm at a loss of words always, but you've essentially hit self-acceptance or euphoria or whatever it is that essentially the most difficult part of the journey in climbing that peak, right, is pretty much over where you've come to a point of realization that here's the path you have to take, and it's going to be easier on the way down, essentially. Um, it it should be a point at which you are more enlightened, essentially, about your situation and
Hmm.
the path you've already taken, and you can stop trying as much and just be.
Which I just want to add a little something that I think ties into pride there. Confidence, right? I think it's almost better to think about the idea of confident in your actions, confident that you are doing good, that you are making a positive impact in the people around you, because self acceptance and confidence go hand in hand, right? You are confident about yourself, you accept yourself, you realize that you have flaws and everything like that. And I think maybe in my perspective, the peak of the mountain is actually the peak of like learning to be confident with yourself. I'm not peak of confidence, right? But it's actually starting to understand what it is to be confident in yourself and in your life. And there is a sense of pride that you get when you've realized that confidence, right? But also, as you start to go back down the mountain, you start to also realize that there's so much more that you don't know, right? And it's becoming confident in what you don't know, which kind of contradicts the pride per se, right? Because now it's not being about being prideful; it's about being understanding, ultimately, through everything in your life.
You know, I may have just used the wrong word. Maybe pride wasn't the right
Yeah,
word,
you did
but
use the wrong word. All right, how dare you?
I definitely I thought more of the idea of like, I don't know, for example, I'm proud of my car, but I'm open to listening to people about my car because it's something I'm proud of and because I want to make it something better. That's how
Hmm.
I saw it, you know. Open-mindedness is something I'm proud of, and it's something that I listen to other people and I take responsibility in my mistakes because it's something I want to be better and it's something that I take pride in, something I have passion in, you know. Um, so I think that's why I see it as like the top of the mountain. You know, it's the point where you're like, I see the changes I make, I accept myself, and I'm proud of how I accept myself, and I'm proud of continuously making changes. As in, since I'm continuously making changes, I will continue that. I'll continue the drive, and I understand that this isn't the top of it, but this is a point where I can continuously grow on because it's something I truly believe in and it's something I'm truly proud of.
Hmm. I think
Interesting.
it's awesome that you were vulnerable, right? And like bringing that up, and then also admitting that you may have used the wrong word, but I don't even know if you necessarily used the wrong word, right? Just to be clear, it's just understanding pride. I think we have to understand it more, right? Because it is something like you want to be proud of yourself, but for what sake, right? Is kind of the thought. Um, and I want to like completely contradict everything that you said because I think what you said was good, but just something to chew on, right? Like for what sake do we want to be prideful?
Hmm.
You know, I feel like there is definitely a line, kind of like with obsession. Like there's toxic pride, you know, and there's
Mm-hmm.
toxic everything in a way, you know. If you believe in something too much, then you're going to be a little bit delusional. I don't believe in myself in the way that I believe I'm the smartest person alive, that there's no growth because I feel like a part of that pride is understanding that I'm never going to be completely, you know, like I'm never going to be a perfect person. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
take pride in the idea that I understand that and I continue to grow because of that. I completely, you know, believe that in the fact that I'm never going to be completely in the right, completely perfect, you know, but I'm always striving to be a better person. So,
That goes
Yeah.
into a little bit of the results of self-actualization. But sorry, Jacob. Before I
that's-
continue, what are you going to
I
say?
was just going to say, to follow that with my rationale of self-acceptance is it's it's when self-reflection stops being like a project and a, a chore essentially and starts becoming something a lot more simple and where you're able to just instead of it being a project and a chore, you're just able to be someone that's better essentially and just it's not as difficult as it was before. You see it as less of a challenge and more of just the way that things are, and that the way things that will continue to be, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
I want to contradict that. I feel like self-reflection, maybe it's just because I'm young and I'm still learning to self-reflect, but self-reflection is always something you have to be completely active in. It's something
Oh,
you
yeah.
always keep in the forefront of your mind, because the minute you self, accept the idea that it's not a chore anymore is kind of when you start slipping again. It's kind of to the point where
It's not that you don't self-reflect, it's that you stop treating it as an obligation, that something is difficult or something you don't want to do, that you have to do compulsively. It is now that you've made those decisions, you have charted your path, and thus your path is set, and there is no going back. It is the way things are now.
But that is a
You can
good
still
point, though.
self-reflect.
Is like I think the coming back to the peak of the mountain is where active and passive self-reflection intersect. And like I think you start to lean more into the passive state of self-reflection, where the active, you have to do more of the hard work, right? Like you're walking up the mountain as a metaphor, but you're doing things on a regular interval to start explore and like understand in more detail. And like you have to do harder work to do an exploration, right? But then like when you're coming down in the passive state, you have more time for your mind to wander. And you've already done all this reflection. So now it's how do I digest this and like take it in from a bigger picture? And this goes into Thinking Fast and Slow, which is a book by Daniel Kahneman, right? He's passed away, Nobel Prize winning economist, but he actually was one of the pioneers of behavioral economics and studied psychology in what he did, which is how he pioneered his field. But the whole thing is like in the state of thinking fast and slow, thinking fast is intentional. We're like devoting ourselves to things, we're like engaged in it, right? And what happens is our prefrontal cortex is also hyper engaged. So what's happening is we're using our logical centers and we're like actually creating substantial outcome that will like intentionally manipulate our brains to the state that we want it to be. But then thinking slow is where transient hypofrontality occurs. And so what that means is that our prefrontal cortex becomes a highway for all of our other thoughts and ideas to intermingle. And like the other hemispheres and components of our brain start to cross communicate. And then so the passive thinking actually becomes a place where a lot of new spontaneous ideas occur. And like, so for example, going back to Albert Einstein, my hero, he used to go on walks with a lot of the different physicists that he loved to work with, or he would go on his own. And some of his brightest ideas came from those times that he went on those walks, because you can't always force yourself to like go through a process. Sometimes you have to let the process happen, right? If that makes sense. People also experience this effect when they go in showers, when they go swimming, or like when they go and work out at the gym per se. Like if you could find that passive exercise too, and the peak being the intersection of active and passive, I think you both have valid points, essentially, is what I'm saying. But I would like to consider both perspectives, the idea of active and passive together.
would you say the climax is when it becomes a habit then?
It was so hard not to make a noise there. I
What
guess so.
noise?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. The climax, you know. Uh,
Oh,
when it
oh.
becomes a habit, I think when the habitual way of thinking is formed, but not when, because sometimes things become a habit, but they don't stick, you know? And so like, it's good to form great habits, but like even my journey with the gym, for example, sorry, that's a funny face. My journey with the gym, I have been like back and forth for like 8 years or so, right? But the ultimate habit that I gained is I went from like a 350-pound person to a 220-pound person. And
Yeah.
then that is like the active versus passive thing is like I can still do things on a regular basis, which is like think about my diet, go for walks, or like pick up the baby, walk up and down the stairs on a more regular basis. Those are like my passive habits now, right? That are just like instilled into me. But then going to the gym and like setting aside that time to take care of myself, like that's the active, meticulous effort. So Yeah, yes, right. But I think they're different types of habits per se.
I see that.
We went through how does practice begin. We talked through a lot of the tools of self reflection just to clarify, and then we went to how do we maintain those practices to a degree because we talked about interval. We didn't really talk about quality, but I think we did in discussing this. We talked about the active and the passive state of reflection. The only things that we didn't really talk about were the journaling piece, which I think we talked about, but we danced around, right? How do we actually journal? And personally, for me, like I like to journal in the morning. If I do so, actually, I think my mind is like the most active and creative during that time, and I think that's a key thought to think about, right? Is like you guys were saying, oh, when do you like to self reflect on the day, right? Well, I tried self reflecting at night on a consistent basis. It ended up being I was like very tired, or like my mind likes to kind of like do like the easier thing, right? But when I get up in the morning, I can self reflect on the entire day before, and also it's my mind is super creative, and it also helps me deal with those incredibly emotional things, right? Where like I don't maybe have that energy as much at the end of the day. So I want to like passively mull it over at the end of the night, but in the morning is when my active practice comes into play. So, and maybe just do you guys have like your own preference, right, on that approach? Like, how would you prefer to go in your active versus passive practice?
I feel like that definitely depends on how your life is built. So I feel like as long as you're actively doing it on some type of schedule, as long as you're reflecting on time, then that's what matters. I personally like to do it at the end of the day, but that's usually because I have to get up early. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm usually a little tired in the morning, but at the end of the day, it kind of just works as a projector of that day, and I get to see exactly what happened today, the initial reactions to everything. I get to think about how this might affect me in the future, how this might affect me tomorrow. Let's say, for example, I got in an argue with my mother. And I get to think at the end of the day, wow, this is what happened. How do I feel about this? How is this going to play out tomorrow? How can I use my best self in this situation that might turn out? But of course, sorry, how can I use how can I react in a way tomorrow that will be the most mature, I guess.
Not
And
even the
I
most
just use
mature, but better, right? If you're just
better,
better than
yep.
you were. Mm-hmm.
The plan. I feel like I get a moment to plan out pretty much how I want to react, and when that time comes, it's almost just rehearsing what I already thought about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
fair.
personally day.
Like you've already put a lot of the practice into place so that like you've thought about this situation. So then next time it comes around, you know how you want to respond. So like you're
Exactly.
exercising more of that freedom and you respond in a way that helps you well feel better about ultimately everything to a degree, but especially like about yourself and how you handled the situation. So,
Preparing your responses.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think that um, the type of reflection, like the tools you're using, is less important than the consistency of your reflection. And I'm going to give an example. The difference between reflecting, and it doesn't even matter the time, but 15 minutes a day, um, and reflecting on the discussions you had with people, the issues you faced, versus putting those off until like a weekend, like Sunday, to then reflect on all those previous discussions you had over the week is not useful. The sooner to when you have to make those decisions or conversations or whoever, the more effective the actual self reflection is. If you get in an argument on Monday and then you wait all the way till next Sunday to do your self reflection, you haven't really gained much compared to reflecting the same day or the very next day. Um, so it's more about the consistency and um, the timely manner of your reflection that actually makes an impact. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would say that it's not useful if you were to do it once a week. It's just that it's more useful if you do it every day,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
You know, I like to challenge that a little bit because I definitely feel like there's different things you can reflect on that changes the frequency of how much you have to reflect on it. Let's say a long-term goal. I feel like some long-term goals do not have to be reflected on a daily basis. It could be a weekly basis that you think, okay, what progress have I made to this goal? How can I continue? You know, and the reason why I think that is because reflecting on something every single night kind of turns into rumination if you're not doing it in an effective manner. If it's not something that you can change the next day, if it's not something you could change in a certain amount of time, then it's not worth really reflecting on. For example, let's say me with my real estate. If I knew my test was in a week, there's not a reason for me. Well, that's not a good example. But let's say 2 months from now, I'm going to be doing my test. Every night, I feel like there's not a reason for me to reflect on the idea, oh, I'm going to be doing my test. What can I do? Let's say
Mm-hmm.
it's more of a weekly thing. This week, I know I want to get this done for this test. And by that, you stop the idea of rumination. I feel like
Um,
you have to categorize your goals, categorize the importance of your goals and the changes that you can do on these, because that's the biggest part. If it's something that you cannot change in that moment, in that next day, in a certain time frame, then it's not worth reflecting on in that specific day, in that specific frequency. And it could be something you reflect on weekly, possibly monthly, if it's like, let's say finances in some ways for some people. At least that's how I think about it.
um, I understand that, but at the same time, just to throw your example in of your real estate license, if you had your test in 2 months from now, and you're like, "Oh, I'll study every other week," it just the importance, like how you feel about that thing, is your importance. Like how important do you think that your real estate license is, or that you will succeed, is almost like a direct response to how much you'll study for things. So if you think it's a life-changing event, you're going to put a lot of time and effort and hopefully reoccurring time to study every night or every other night for that test. But the, just like self-reflection, if you don't do that regularly and you put it off, or you do it every like 2 weeks and you only get 4 study sessions in, but you did 8 hours, right? In those study sessions, it's going to be just less effective
Mm-hmm.
than putting it um, every day or every other day or whatever your cadence is for studying. So in the same way, it is about consistency. Now, not everything needs to be done every day. You don't have to self-reflect about every single thing on your goal. Like if you're working on a large project that takes 6 months to a year to complete, you might not need to think about it every day or every other day. You can say, okay, here's what we did for the week or the month, and here's how far we've gotten. This is what might need to change, especially if this is a multi-year long project. Um, uh, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the times in like software development, there's like the concept of agile, and there's cadences to a lot of the things that you work on, and there's supposed to be at the end of it a point of like self-reflection and team. I forget what the word is, but in
Retrospective.
agile, retrospective, where you
Mm-hmm.
you look at the previous week, you ask what have we done poorly, what can we do better, and what can we do next week, essentially something like that.
One more
That
thing, what was
I'll leave
beyond our
it to you.
control too.
What is beyond our control is another
Mm-hmm.
one, which is a pretty big one, but that allows you to plan for the future and how you'll make decisions moving forward. So in the same light, it depends on the length and the importance of the project.
Yeah, it's the importance of it, and then it's also how much do you feel like you have control of that thing too, right? Is very
Yes.
important. So like it's your perceived importance,
Mm,
which I think is the most important perspective of
yeah.
importance, but it's also like, do you feel like you can change the outcome, or do you actually feel like you have control over that outcome? Which is another thing, because like things that we don't feel like we have control over. So like, say you get your real estate license, right? Now you're going to sell a house right away, right? Like that's a whole new layer of complexity and like challenge that comes before you, where it's like the success of this endeavor may not be within my control, right? Because I have to, right? But it's also now the more you study, not necessarily the real estate license book, but the more you study about becoming a real estate agent, I think, right? Which is the bigger picture. Where do you have more control in the conversation and the idea, right? And what does it take to like market your brand? What does it take to like make those relationships and to like close a successful deal and things like that? That's how you bring the locus of control into your forefront, and then also the idea that the importance of the thing starts to rise at the same time. So the more we actually have perceived control over a thing, the more the importance of it actually increases in our life. And I want to like go back to well, I want to go to like our closing stuff because we're getting a little bit late on time right now. But for results, then, right? I think that's also even like a more considerable thing, right? Because you're just talking about right now about a result, like an outcome that you want to achieve, which learning, self reflection, right? They can go kind of hand in hand in a lot of ways. But that idea of control, right? Like, what can we control in our results in this whole situation? And I want to just open up. I think you have some thoughts there, Alize. So,
I think I have some thoughts on the control.
no,
Like,
just anything. You have some thoughts right now. So, go ahead.
no,
Uh-huh.
I definitely agree with what you guys said. I use a bad example. Definitely. I definitely explained that wrong. But same idea. I definitely agree that things, let's say a multi-year project is not something that you should be focusing on, reflecting on, daily or, on a certain frequency. And the idea of getting to the point of rumination, getting to a point where to a certain point it's out of your control instead of breaking it down into maybe smaller steps or to a frequency that makes more sense, that actually makes more progress in a way. Um, when it comes to what was it, control that you said?
Well, results is really where we're getting
Result.
now, right? So now that we've gone through the theory and the understanding, right, and then what is the practice of self-reflection? Now, like, what do we hope to achieve as results?
I feel like we all definitely agreed that there's no concrete way to see your results. I feel like the most agreed idea is creating actions that you're proud of. You living in that freedom of res- uh, reaction to response and living in that moment where you can respond in a better way than you would have in the past to each, you know,
Mm-hmm.
event that's happening to you pretty much. So I think that's where true results lie in your reaction to events that you would have reacted differently in the past and in a reaction that you're proud, well, maybe not proud, but a reaction that's better than what it would have been.
So per se, like living a more willful and then self-substantiated life. Like you have more control over the outcomes in your life, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Jacob, what do you think?
Um, Trying to achieve specific results are like a fool's errand. There is no, you have no control over the exact results you'll get. You just know that with the actions you take, there will be a result, regardless of the quality or the result the specific result you're looking for, you should be putting actions in place to make things better, not to have some end game goal of um, some idea or um, I guess just result.
You're thinking of Andrew, huh?
You don't you don't have this you can't just will things into existence, right? And you can't guarantee that something will happen with your actions. You just have to make your best concerted effort into honing what you believe will give you the result you're looking for and accept it at the end of the day, or continue to work on it. You don't have to ever stop, depends on your goal essentially, but you need to exercise a little bit of control and discipline so that you can understand that not everything is just as, I guess, discrete as one would like. Like, it's not 1 or 0 or
Mhm.
on or off. Sometimes you'll only ever be able to get 90% of the way to completing your goal, and you have to be okay with that because you know that you both made the best effort you could, and that is the best result you could have gotten.
Or even if it's not per se the best result that you could have gotten, it's the best. Well, no, sorry. It is the best result that you could have gotten that time, right? If that makes sense, because that's the best that you put into it. And then if like you were to do it again, you could per se even do it better. But like it's the best of the moment, essentially, right? Also, I wanted to kind of draw an idea or a line between like the targeting of a result and the achievement of a result. Because the targeting, I think, is actually a very fruitful effort, especially as we come into a path of like self awareness, right? Like, say I know I have challenges with anger at times, right? I have challenges with honestly believing in myself and like what I should or could do, right? So like targeting the idea that those things could be challenged and that the actionable results are I can temper my anger or I can find more confidence and like focus more time into like realizing those outcomes that I believe I can achieve, right? Those are like the things that will then lead me to the actual results that I achieve at the end of the day, right? But the other side of the coin is like what I achieve may not be what I expect ultimately. So it's like accepting that the achievement is good enough, right? I think that's what you were saying very much, Jacob. But I think the idea of the targeting too is incredibly powerful because knowing where your weaknesses lie helps you define those targets ultimately, right? Like your weaknesses in self perception, self reflection. If you can use that to define your targets, then you can grow at like a quicker pace because you know those things are to a degree a challenge. But also there's a catch 22 there. It's like are you actually truly self-aware, right? Where we said at the beginning of this, like only 15% of people are actually truly self-aware. So sometimes we might get caught in the idea of the target. And so that's, to your point, Jacob, the idea of the practice ignoring, right? Any idea of what is my specific target. If I have the practice, I will achieve the outcome, right? Eventually. But if I only ever focus on the targets and like try and achieve the things that are within my targets, then I may never achieve the full outcome, right? Of like self awareness or self actualization because I can't actually get outside the box of what I believe I should be or what I believe I should understand. It's a complex one. But
It's a good one.
You want to add to that, Alize, or should I add to that?
I mean, I can add, I mean, this is a whole new topic, but the idea of open-mindedness into that, how you have your weaknesses, but you can't only focus on your weaknesses. You have to be open-minded of the other parts where, sure, you're stronger at, but you could still work on. You could still reflect on and grow in order to reach that euphoria or, reach the, euphoria the right word?
Nirvana, not euphoria. Yeah. We're not hedonists, okay? Jeez.
Anyways, reach the nirvana, Um, I feel like that's all I have to add to that. Keeping an open mind. Keeping the open mind is a very big part of reflection. And you can have your targets, but you can't also just completely cut off those other parts that you feel like you're good enough at. Because the idea is that you're never completely
Mm-hmm.
perfect in any section, you know? What do you think, Jacob?
I was gonna say that a lot of the time, as an example, people build goals. I see this all the time. Some people say, I want to lose weight, or I want to build a business, or I want to make $1 million or $1 billion. And they say, essentially, and essentially it just like stops like that. Because they put this goal on a pedestal that is essentially unobtainable.
Mm-hmm.
Not that
Unobtainium.
losing weight is unobtainable, but like if they say, "Oh, I want to have a six pack in 6 months, and I want to do this special diet or something extreme," they'll often fail because it's not about doing something for a fixed amount of time. You need to build habits and expectations that match your effort. And a lot of the times people don't want to put that effort in. Like, unfortunately, Jeff Bezos essentially dedicated his life towards, at least the later part of his life when he started Amazon, towards his business. And it is a sacrifice that people have to make. It's not just something he did on his like side gig, you know. Just like bodybuilders, if you want to build a beautiful body, go to the gym and all this stuff, they spend a lot of time doing that. You will never be the best at something unless you dedicate a lot of time to something. And they have this expectation that just anyone can achieve it with a little bit of effort. It
Yeah.
takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, and a lot of discipline to achieve your goals.
Like most bodybuilders have been in the sport for like 8 to 12 years, you know?
Yeah, they spend years in the gym, essentially, where they're spending multiple hours a day, every day in the gym, training just to be a bodybuilder. Like these are not easy tasks. Being a billionaire is not an easy task, and there's many goals, incremental goals, or side things that need to be completed before then. Like like if you want a six pack, you can't just lift weights all day nonstop. You also have to fix other things, live a healthy lifestyle, a balanced diet, and achieve it through multiple ways. It's all encompassing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a narrow path. You can't just do one thing and one thing only a lot of the times.
So it's acknowledging that like lifestyle changes, right,
Yeah,
are
it
really
is a
key.
all-encompassing change to your life essentially that you need to do
And you can't just like
to
set a
for large
goal
goals.
and then not achieve it without a lifestyle change. Like even going back to the metaphor of
Hmm.
Jeff Bezos, he just basically gave up. Like that dude doesn't go to the gym, right? Maybe now he does, but he didn't, right? For years, he drove a Honda Civic and he slaved away in an office that he paid
For
like
like
500
a
bucks,
long time.
yeah, a month for years, selling books initially. Um, and then he built that business and, probably sacrificed his marriage, probably sacrificed a lot of his relationships, right? All different things to get to where he was. And like that's the other side of the coin too, is like the idea of achieving outcomes. It always comes with some degree of sacrifice. But what is a
Yeah.
healthy degree of sacrifice, right? I think is also important to understand. Like there is such a thing as healthy suffering, and there's no such thing as results without identifying that healthy suffering and then compounding on it. But also, I did want to call out, especially Alize, like the point that you made, understanding and leaning into our strengths to accelerate our results, right? Like these are some things that we could probably talk about in like following conversations, but it's also something that we tend to overlook and tend to understate, right? Like you don't necessarily believe in your strengths, even though you might know that you have them, and you don't necessarily lean into your strengths because you haven't been taught to like utilize them more holistically, you know? So that's why we're starting you on the bodybuilding path at 19. So then when you're 29, you'll be nice and yoked, So
I just wanted to also state that Jeff Bezos only became a millionaire by 1997 when his IPO actually hit, where he made $58 million all at once, essentially. Like that's when his net value hit $58 million. So he wasn't actually like a lot of people think Jeff Bezos kind of came out of nowhere. It's not really true. He's been around for a long time, working in a garage selling books before all of this. So
I don't know what it's like to work in a garage at all, dude. What do you mean?
yeah, we'll get there one day. But yeah, exactly. So it's not like you just appear. You don't achieve all your goals. There's incremental steps to achieving the bigger whole. You'll never make Amazon yourself. You have to first maybe start with a bookstore in your garage.
Mm-hmm. So you guys have any closing thoughts? Go ahead,
just
Alice. I cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, I feel like that's an important part of growth as well, is that, and we were talking about this earlier, Jacob, a part of growing is sometimes not even seeing a change and sometimes going through the same repetitive motion. Obviously there's steps, but for example, Jacob was saying before how he'll do the same machine at the gym and he will not change his weight. But then he changes to another machine that he hasn't done in a while, and it's a complete different, it's completely easier, and he can up the weight and everything. And that's an important part, Sometimes growth looks like nothing. Sometimes growth feels like nothing. Even though you are growing, you aren't doing much, and sometimes feel like for a long while you're doing the same thing. Kind of like Jeff Bezos and how he worked at a office for years and years, and then finally he made the next step. Yes, there's smaller steps in there that he was achieving, but sometimes it feels like not much is changing. And I don't know, I just feel like that's the important part. That's more self-growth.
That's called grit, by the way. I don't know if you know that term. Yeah, you could say grit, right? But Angela Duckworth wrote a really good book about it, and she studied naval officers going through the U.S. Naval Academy, and like what determined their graduation rate was grit, basically, or like their scores and then their placement in the future. Grit is your ability to tolerate a hard and uncomfortable situation with the idea of long-term results, essentially, that you will achieve those results, which I think would be a great idea for us to talk about in another podcast.
I just want to finish from a quote from John Dewey.
Why are you doing this to me, man?
The quote goes, "We do not learn from experiences, we learn from reflecting on experiences." And I think that is a really crucial part of the self-reflection process.
Yeah, I like it.
I agree.
Jose?
I like that one quote you told me that time, Jacob. That one quote from that one time that you once said.
I got a lot of quotes.
You'd have to find it, but it was something like, kind of like how I was saying, you don't.
Is it about wanting?
No. It was like the first step of growth is being upset, is being uncomfortable. The first, you're growing when you're uncomfortable. It was something like that, and it was how for growth to happen, you have to be defeated. You have to be uncomfortable, and that's almost the sign. So, what?
You ready? It goes, "Sometimes we get so caught up in chasing our desires that we lose sight of what truly matters, and the cost of settling for less can be harder than being completely obedient to our own values. While satisfaction may bring temporary peace, it can also lead to a comfort zone that stratifies growth. True fulfillment comes from actively defining life the way you want to live, rather than passively accepting what is offered."
That wasn't it, but that's a good one too.
Okay. Damn it.
That's great.
I'm sure it's somewhere there.
There's a lot here. Hold on.
Yeah, you didn't read that off to her. I got a quote too.
Oh,
So when you guys are ready.
let's hear it.
Okay. It's actually Teddy Roosevelt, who's my favorite president, by the way. But it's really kind of interesting quote. It's all about attitude, but it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who drives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great, enthusiasm, the great devotion, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he falls, at least falls while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither knew victory nor defeat. He said that in one of his inaugural speeches or something, I think. But yeah, we want to know victory or defeat.
Very nice.
Next time I'll have the quote a little bit closer to me so I could read it a little bit better. But
A little bit closer.
yeah,
On the
it's
wall.
on the, it's on,
I'm
it's
here.
on the wall up there.
Listening.
Yeah, it's stuck to my door. So
Julia,
No, but
did you hear anything?
your tattoo. I heard you guys. The baby, I apologize, was very loud and didn't want to distract your great conversation. But Joe, what about your tattoo? I think that would be a nice short quote to end it, and not as long as Teddy Roosevelt, but
well,
same idea.
I think you have a quote that parallels with it too, right? So why don't you say it?
I don't have a quote. No, you say yours first.
Well, what is yours? What's your saying?
Never grow up.
Mm-hmm. And what's my quote?
Never knows best.
Mm-hmm. Coming full circle to
that?
inner child here. So
Yeah, I was just gonna say, here we go. I didn't even get to go on to my. I think you guys touched upon a lot of that, but that could be a whole nother conversation and digging deep into that and how that affects and the importance of self-reflection with your inner child, make you more self-aware. But you guys did amazing, and I learned a lot from just listening to you guys, even though I was not able to participate as much. So thank you.
yeah, sorry you had the baby, but we recorded it all. So good news, you can go back and watch it. That's your homework for next
Great.
time.
You're welcome.
A lot of insight.
You're
I'll
welcome.
self-reflect on that.
You have to
There you
make
go.
fun of Jacob and Alize and be super, super nice to me. So
Yep, true.
What?
Mhm.
What?
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 I'm the boss. You can't insult the boss. What are you talking about?
I'm gonna
Yeah.
set a boundary here, guys.
No, you're not the boss. You are not the boss. Julie is the boss. We know how that
That's
household
true.
runs.
Yeah, I gotta know my place. But
Yeah, there you go.
In the baby.
oh, there's the boss. There we go.
Look at
Oh, kitty. All right, I'm gonna stop
Very
recording.
nice.
Wonder how big that was.
Too
For a
Big.
while. I mean, how long?
The file.
I think.
It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
7:45 or something, right? It's a long time. Long time.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I really wanted to chime in a couple times, but the
You
baby
should've.
was fussing. And I was like, I can't even hear myself, my thoughts, you guys. So it was just easier to just listen, but you did awesome.
Do you have any ending thoughts? Like anything that you wanted to touch on that you could remember? I'm sure it's a lot.
I did like what Jacob said about, daily self-reflection. I think that's important. And I think that you guys, I don't know if you mentioned it, but just being able to do it anywhere you are, like when you're exercising, like it doesn't have to look like, this strenuous, like this horrible thing. I think if you put it into your daily routine, I think it would be, you would do it more often than acting as it's tedious and like not, I thought he made a good point about that, doing it daily.
Okay, we
Well,
recording?
Yeah. It's good. Like at the gym, exercising, meditation, journaling, all the things you guys said was great, great options. But it is easier to tell yourself,
Okay, we
like,
recording?
no, I don't really want to do that, right? And you're gonna do that because you don't want, it's harder to be accountable for your actions than to sit down and think about it and how you can be accountable for your actions. So I think that if you have time to think about how to be negative, you have time to think about how to be positive, right? So daily, like finding a space, a time every day is important for self-reflection. Whatever that looks like to you.
That's a
Listening to
really good
music,
point, though.
exercising. Huh?
If you have time to think about being negative, you have time to think about being positive, you know?
Yeah, because you convince yourself like all the ways to not do something, and if you have time to do that, right? Like you might as well spend your energy thinking about uh, what you can do and what is in your control, and not things that you can't do.
Mhm.
You could have been dropping good quotes during the podcast.
I know.
Uh,
That's a good one, though.
I couldn't speak though. I wanted to chime in, but then it was like too late, and then yeah. So
Oh,
you were asking me about my final thoughts, but you guys did. You covered all of that, so that was
We did
great.
okay. You know, we could have done better.
oh,
There's always better.
Always
As
there's
better.
we're
always
self-reflecting
I
on,
agree.
Mm-hmm.
we're self-reflecting on what we just did.
yes.
Could have been better.
Yes.
I'm just dropping the video file from everything too.
Hello.
So
I just feel like you're not thinking positive enough, Joe.
Are you-
Oh, you
Um,
might want to control those actions there.
me and my table slapping.
Yeah.
But part of that, Julia, to go back to that, is self-reflection is not there to make you feel a certain way. It's not meant to, what are you doing?
Nothing.
It
Let
is
me
not
look
there
at
for
my
you to
nose.
feel what you wish happened, but it's there to reflect on what actually happened and what you can do next time to make it better. So, though you can, most people reflect on negative feelings because it is what they want to change moving forward. It's a lot more common to self-reflect on the negative feelings than on the positive feelings, which I think would be pretty common. But
Which is where
to
the rumination comes
yeah,
into play, right?
but that isn't necessarily rumination. It's just what is common. And if you can't think about the negative things, you can only think about positive things, then you may not actually make the changes you need. It has to be a mix of both positive and negative. Like you have to reinforce good behavior and change negative behavior.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not also just more the most common. It's actually the scientifically like biological way that we are programmed because
Maybe.
negative stimulus has a more natural response because it was more beneficial for us, right? In a world where we had to deal with prey and predator relationships, that we actually needed to respond like more directly to negative stimuli and like theorize and deal with that. But actually, now that our world has shifted, where like
Yeah.
it is generally like a safer world, what happens is living in a space of consistent negative stimulus creates like unrealistic stress essentially, right? Because like it's the we never actually got to touch on this before, but it's the what are they called? Alternative facts, right? Like you're creating alternative facts for a universe that doesn't necessarily exist because you have all that time to create alternative facts. We're creating more alternative facts than have ever even been made in the past, right? Well, so like the whole idea of negative perception was useful when a tiger was going to jump my bones in the middle of the night, right? And I had to be careful. But now that I'm living in a world where I can sleep in a safe house and I can, watch Stranger Things in the middle of the night, it's just completely unhealthy, and it's like how our brain is wired to set us up for failure, essentially.
Are you insinuating that these fears and negative responses are manufactured from our own unconscious,
Generally, yeah, unfortunately.
unconscious, subconscious,
Subconsciously unconscious.
consciously unsubconscious?
There's nothing to fear. Fear itself.
And Joe.
Hmm.
I fear
And these nostrils.
him.
How dare you?
Oh my
Wow.
God, the sleeping. No, he doesn't. Why are you so quiet, Joe? Your sound is not as loud as everybody else's. I have
You
to
might
turn
have
it
to
up
turn
so I
me
can
up.
hear you.
Yeah.
It's weird the whole time. But yeah, I think too, like self-reflection is like also emotional, right? Like that's why it could be negative, right? Because you're thinking like you're trying to be perfect, or you're like defensive, or something happened, like something happened in your childhood that makes you have those kind of things, fear of like being judged, or shame, or you've shaped your view of how you think of things. So a lot of it is going to be a little bit negative, and that's like what you've kind of suppressed as your inner child is trying to suppress that, because you don't want to deal with that. So that's the importance of being self-reflective and aware, is that you are now dealing with those things that you're trying to suppress. So you could ask yourself, like, why am I feeling like this? That's why it's so important to just sit with yourself in meditation, or just sit with your thoughts, because just taking the time to do that is important. Maybe less than just like thinking about a goal or a project or something, like a big thing. Like there's always like things that you could self-reflect on, like, but just sitting with yourself and thinking about how you're feeling, and just being present and honoring yourself and being mindful, I think is like the first step of being self-aware.
I also think meditation is like a perfect intersection of like active and passive practice, right? Which we didn't talk about it too much, but like you have to let your mind wander and think. And it is like that same state of like transient hypofrontality, but it's also practicing putting yourself into that state, which is super powerful. So I don't know, just a cool thought, but also
Suppress the inner child. Suppress it.
sorry. Go ahead.
Oh my goodness.
What's that? What was that?
Like actually, what was that?
That was scary. Is that Darth Vader? No, he
That
doesn't.
shows the inner
No,
child.
Batman.
Suppress the child.
Wow. Wow.
Bit too intense, Joe.
I got it more
Oh, you
intense.
could change your voice.
Yes, I can.
You should have
I can
spoken
change
like
my
that the whole
voice.
time.
However I like to. So
I love that.
this Alice does not like it. No, she's.
I don't know if I could take you seriously if you.
Mm.
I could do the whole
Yeah.
podcast like this if you guys want. Yeah,
Yeah,
So-
you don't know what it sounds like.
And nobody will listen.
I do know what it sounds like because I hear it through the microphone. I always hear my own voice. So.
Are you doing an impression of me?
Hey, wait.
Yeah, it sounds exactly like you.
It sounds like me.
We're done recording, by the way, so we could be as silly as we want, but
Oh, I got a pump. Actually.
you remember that?
Okay.
Did you do that in school, Alize, or were you guys having too much fun with your
She doesn't know
iPhones?
what that is.
Did you ever do that?
My iPhones.
Yeah.
I had a
Never did.
Razor phone. A
What was
Razor
that?
flip phone in high school.
I said I've never did that, but I've seen it before. I don't know how to though.
You do.
We did weird things. Like, I don't even know why.
And then you say girl. But you
comes from
do
your
use your
throat,
tongue.
like, g.
Yeah, use your throat.
Go go. What?
There you
Go
go.
yo yo yo. Go yo 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 yo.
You could just like.
I had a
I could do it. Yeah.
Just pushes like the G from your throat. This is learning a lot. All right, I need to pop and go, but you guys did phenomenal. Thank you for running the show, and I'm sorry I couldn't be part of it.
We'll have to try and work it out. Maybe we'll get a
Yeah, that didn't
babysitter or
work.
something.
The
Yeah.
baby woke up and she was miserable because I think the timing, it was like
Mm-hmm.
she didn't want to get fully up. I didn't even realize what time it was. It was like almost 9. I was like, shit, she's not ready to be up. So
Let's talk to Nancy and Bella and see if she can babysit, right?
maybe.
She's certified in CPR.
I don't know.
She's a babysitter.
Have you tried getting Lily to self-reflect on her choices when it comes to crying?
Yeah, actually, we do want her to do that. She's got to self-soothe and she's got to think about how she's going to make herself feel better while we can't console her because she's not going to have her parents there all the time. So she has to sit with herself.
We are actually working on that. Yeah. But like
Oh.
in a sleeping
Self-report.
practice. Yeah.
Huh?
Uh-huh.
I said put her in a corner and say, self-reflect.
I hear you. I can't hear him at all. Like it's, I
How you
don't know.
did-
Do you guys have a hard time hearing Joe, or is it on my end?
I think I have him boosted. It might just be on because he changed his setup a little bit, right? Or somewhere else.
Fine. for
Yeah.
me. You might need to
Okay.
right click on him and then
Oh, maybe.
maybe change the user volume. If it's
As long as
low.
you guys, okay.
Yeah.
As long as you guys heard it okay, because if the podcast was, yeah.
I recorded, so like if I didn't hear anyone, I would have adjusted it. But as far as I heard, we all sounded the same on my side. So
Yay.
yeah.
Good job, team. That was nice.
Good job,
Next
team.
time. Maybe we could shorten it next time. It's too long.
Well, the video that we publish will be shortened, and so will the podcast itself. So, but we have to go through and edit, and I think we'll probably do like 4 or 5 videos, right? Like record them before we go back and like start releasing, essentially. But, whiteboard. Oh
What
no,
is
I have to
that?
give permission. Ugh.
What do you have to do?
I don't know. Sorry.
It's getting it. I don't know what this is.
Reflect.
You literally could just draw. That's it.
Yeah.
That was.
Nerd.
What's that game that we used to play, Joe, during COVID? It was like, you had to draw something and they had to guess what it was.
Yeah.
Doodle?
Drawio. Or
Yes. Yeah.
It was part of Jackbox games or whatever.
fun.
Yeah.
No,
think it
wasn't
had-
it? It was I thought it was something separate. It wasn't
It just,
Jackbox.
it just always ended up being penises, though. That was the problem. So
No.
What's
Yeah, it
the
was.
problem?
that's so everyone always
she-
drew. It was some version of a penis. It was terrible. So
That's not it. It was, I don't know. Anyways, I gotta go.
that's
go
our
time
friends.
anyway.
I'm gonna send a video in the group chat. It's mostly for Julia because I feel like it was really good. It's only like 15 minutes long, but I feel like it's a good one. It was talking about like the 90-second thing about anger and everything. So I'm gonna send it. It was a decent video. And it kind of just is a good overview, I feel. Just it, yeah.
For my anger management issues.
Yes. For your anger management. It's getting out of hand, Julia.
I know, I gotta get really of myself.
You really gotta reflect on that already.
Thank you. Reflect.
Oh,
I don't even
Oh.
know.
Reflect on these
on these.
poots.
Oh. What is she drawing?
Okay.
Aw.
That's cute, baby.
It was like a little wobbly. This didn't work. Wait, how do you clear it?
Can you?
I think so.
Oh, if you go. No, never mind. Yeah, it's just
Just
got
let
stuck in.
undo. That's it.
Oh,
Thing.
okay.
Oh, who
There you
did that?
go.
That was smart. I was gonna
Oh.
say one person has to draw a shape and the next person has to add to it.
There you go.
Okay. You
You
can
could be
only add
still
one
awake
thing to
there.
somebody's drawing. Ready? Who's doing
Okay.
what first?
Okay.
Someone start. Alze start, make a shape or something. And then
Okay.
Jacob go. And then
Okay.
Joe add something.
I didn't
This is
add
gonna-
anything. I got cut off.
Oh, jeez.
Denied.
I don't
It's
even know.
my. Wait, where's my pen?
You guys are doing
I
that.
can't. How come I can't do it?
Um,
Sorry. It's not working how I was hoping.
hey guys, what'd you make?
You guys having fun with your Picasso thing over
Building
there?
a bridge. Building a bridge.
Putting a
With a
bridge.
trellis.
A very-
Exactly. You
Oh,
wouldn't
I'm not-
understand. Look,
Did add some.
Oh,
That's-
drawbridge.
that's-
Okay.
and then
I'll
what
look
you
at
do is you get the yeah, you get the water. That's a bridge.
oh. Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now I see the bridge. Before I...
You weren't looking that hard, honestly. It's very important.
Julia, they made your drawing into something inappropriate.
What do you mean?
In case you missed it.
I missed it.
Yeah.
I didn't see, but I can imagine based on the shapes what we're going for here. All right, you guys, my eyeballs are tired. Good night.
Good night.
It's like
Thank you for including me.
Nighty night.
worse.
I'll figure out how to end the call eventually.
Let's just all wait for her to end.
It's a fancy bridge now.
Oh wow.
Oh. Why
Honestly,
is
doesn't know what that is. Don't worry.
there water on the bridge?
No, it's a fancy bridge. It's got ornate design.
Details. Details.
See? I could put a little leaf up in here.
Little leaf.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Wow. And we
That's
get the
amazing.
road. Oh wow, that needs to be much bigger.
Real thick. Oh my goodness. Oh.
What? What? It's a road. Let me get there. Doop, 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 doop. Bridge. Bridge.
No. Wait a second.
Doop, 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 doop.
Wow.
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 Mm.
Bridgeroni.
Bridgeroni. That's the name of it.
Mm-hmm.
I got this for you, Joe. Found it. Merry Christmas. Reply. Bam. Mm.
Bridgeroni.
Full star on top of the bridge now. Too. Full star bridge. Oh, we're still streaming, by the way. Good gosh.
Are we?